Happy Sunday, everybody, and welcome to another Hog Hoops Report. As always, that is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. And Kevin, we are in the summer, which means summer league. And unfortunately, a lot of the Razorback faces we thought we might see, we're not going to end up seeing. A few will be active, but we start with the big one. I don't know where you were at, Kevin, but when Adu Thero was drafted by the Lakers, I got really excited from the standpoint of what we talked about last week. I think there's potential for him to help that team. I think that is even more now the fact that Dorian Finney-Smith isn't on the
Oh,
team anymore, and he ultimately signed with Houston. That opens up an Adu Thero 6'7" size spot for the Lakers. And I said, man, if he could have a strong summer league performance, we could see something pretty special potentially come this season. But it turns out we learned this week he's still rehabbing that knee injury that had to miss the last two regular season games as well as the postseason. Unfortunate not to see Adu have a summer league opportunity here.
it's unfortunate, but remember where he was drafted. This doesn't disturb,
Yeah.
the contract negotiations. It doesn't change anything in terms of was he going to have to prove himself to
Mhm.
get a better deal? No, those things at that draft pick, he's in good shape. In fact, the Lakers made moves in a trade scenarios to get to a point where they could get him at 36, and so for anybody is wondering about that, take that off the table. It's just the idea that the summer league is a good launching pad for a lot of players to kind of get a feel for. It's not the same as NBA play, but it's
Mhm.
that next rung, and you're measuring yourself against some of the top guys. And each organization, they have a way they like to do things, their culture, their the system of play, those kind of things. And so you get opportunities to measure yourself early and build towards training camp. So this is off the table for him, but it's always anytime there's an injury scenario or something, especially lower body, lower leg stuff, your wheels effectively, you don't want to
Yeah.
blow one too soon. So it's better to be precautionary than not to be. So from that standpoint, summer league it's not a crushing blow that you're missing out, but it is for the fans, for especially Hog fans. John Calipari's first drafted player since coming to Arkansas. We know his history of loading the league up with just really good players and deep. He's got a depth of rosters, players on rosters around the NBA. Duthero's the next guy, and you want that early glimpse. You want to see. Sometimes you get a good glimpse at guys that were drafted highly. They're going to be stars, and you see glimpses of it. Then there are the other guys, early second round, maybe undrafted, you see in these events, and they raise their profile. You're like,
Mhm.
wow, that guy might be better than what. So those are the kind of little things. Not that the summer league proves anything most of the time, but sometimes it does, and we're just not going to get to see that. We're going to have to wait to see what Adu Thero does in his pro career.
That last element there, that's what I was referencing from the standpoint that we heard, we talked about it last week. Rob Pelinka talked about Adu for 5, 6 minutes, and he kept talking about Adu in the way that, we have for the past couple months, and that you can see athletically the potential that is there. And so, what the Summer League is for guys like Adu, guys in that second round, early second round spot, like you've talked about extensively, is it's a chance to quite honestly just get reps against guys that aren't true NBA caliber, but are approaching that in a lot of cases are pushing that. And that is
Yeah,
for a guy like Adu who is athletically has all the tools in the world, but is still a little bit raw in the areas he's going to need to ultimately carve out a role. That's where Summer
yeah.
League is really valuable. It just would have been fun to see him have that opportunity. But regardless, you talked about it and Palinka talked about it as well. They viewed him as a first round talent and they made it a priority to go up and get him trade wise. Is aside of just, hey, a dude's going to be playing with LeBron and Luca. We'll see what happens with LeBron, I guess. But Luca, it is a really interesting fit and one where I don't know how big, but you really could see a dude potentially get some run here for this Lakers team.
You could, you mentioned Dorian Finney-Smith. We talked about that before. He's gone. And so, LeBron, who's going to give you some minutes off the ball at that three and sometimes a 3-4 combo. He's 40 plus years old now, man. And I mean, he's not going to play every minute of every game. That's just not a thing anymore, as good as he still is. And so there's opportunities there for a healthy Adu Thero who's ready to go. They think he's going to be ready for training camp, which is obviously is very important. And then you have preseason. You go right from training camp, like a few days, handful of days or less, right into preseason games. So we'll see. but the opportunities, and you talk about playing, if you're on the court with LeBron and or Luka at the same time, they just went and got DeAndre Ayton, the big
Yeah.
man. So that kind of answered some question marks. Maybe we'll see how it all fits together. But imagine a Duke Thero on a fast track in transition, get lob passes from these guys. They're going to make him look really good just off their creation, and his own athleticism and power are going to be the other bookend of that, looking really good, and maybe some Sports Center top 10 highlight kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, it's his ability to be versatile defensively,
Mhm.
switch, and his aggressiveness, his attacking weak passes, getting deflections. And I mentioned getting out in transition. This is a guy that, as he adds more to his shooting skill, and if he can just get competent in a few areas, as of always, probably going to be a fourth or fifth option on the offensive end. The sky's the limit for this guy, and there is a sense that potentially this is a first round value that had he not gotten hurt, he probably sneaks into the late part of that
Yeah.
first round, because I had sources that said, look, at least a handful of teams, and these are my NBA sources, back in the process before the draft went down, they said at least a handful of teams viewed him as a first round talent, except for questions on the knee. So don't lose sight of that. I think the Lakers bought into that and said, "Yeah, I don't know that they view this as much of a roll of the dice as they do a sound investment."
Yeah, and it's also a reminder. These are the types of players when you look at the frame that Adu has, where we see it every single year in the playoffs. The guys that you need to have to be versatile defensively to win games. Adu fits that mold, and you never know how this stuff is going to go. You never know how it's all going to pan out. But it is interesting from the standpoint that maybe it all just ends up working out. Of course, he would have liked to be a high draft pick, a first round guy, but with
Yeah,
so many different guys, especially rookies, it's situation dependent. And when you end up on the court potentially with Luka and LeBron are two of the smartest basketball players in the entire
yeah.
world, that can only serve to make you better. It'll be interesting to watch it do as training camp and preseason rolls around. But somebody we will probably see in summer league is Jordan Walsh for the Boston Celtics, a guy who is,
Yeah.
he's ridden the bench for the Celtics, but it's hard to crack a lineup with a team that has been at the top of the NBA since he's really gotten into the
Yeah.
league. What do you expect to see from Jordan here coming up in summer league?
Just opportunities, get more reps. He's a guy that's been a little used, as you said. He spent a lot of time in the G League. He's
Hmm.
done some good things. Boston, because they're so good, they had the liberty of plugging him into their top two rotation at times in the regular season. And a lot of that was just about the fact that this was a team that could give him some opportunities, give him some looks. Especially, you talk about defensive potential.
Hmm.
3-and-D wing, man, that's what that's what it's going to be if it's going to happen for him. He needs to get more consistent shooting the three. But you look at his length, his athleticism, the motor, and he can create havoc on the defensive end. There were a couple of games I remember in the regular season where the winning and losing was still on the table, and he came in and gave him an influx of energy. One of those energy guys making some blue collar plays, and so that's what he's got to be. He's just got to get better at it, and over time, prove that he belongs, and that a team needs him on a 15-man going forward. And this is an opportunity again for Jordan Walls to showcase some of that with more playing time and more opportunities in a summer league scenario.
That's the path for so many guys is, pick your basketball cliche, right? Doing the dirty
Yeah.
work, being a gritty, whatever it might be. That's the path for guys like this to separate yourself. Not to always bring things back to the Pacers, but I just always think of TJ McConnell, Kevin, a guy that
Yeah.
I don't think he has a physical asset that would scream NBA on any part of him whatsoever. But, one of his quotes that is one of my favorites overall is he said, "I truly believe hustle and heart is a skill." And that for guys like this that are searching to make an NBA roster is what potentially could push you over the top. We'll talk more Summer League Hogs coming up, but first, a quick break. Back here on the Hog Hoops Report, Kevin McPherson and Jacob Morris with you. Kevin, let's keep rolling through the Summer League here. A guy that we know on a Summer League roster, John L. Davis, Nelly Davis with the Orlando Magic. He is another guy where interesting tools in terms of we've seen what he can do. He's an older guy. He's not a guy that you look at and say, "Oh my goodness, the potential is off the charts. We don't know what we have with him." But it's going to be an interesting fit and a guy again that in a summer league situation, if given the right opportunities, could potentially thrive.
Yeah, what Nelly, probably best case for him right now is playing himself into some two-way
Yep.
contract consideration. And it doesn't have to be Orlando. Every
Mhm.
league you're on auditioning in the summer league for all 30 teams. We've seen that play out for some of the pro hogs in the last several years. We always mention some of these games, guys like some of these names, guys like Daryl Macon, Mason Jones, Stanley and Moody, some of these players. And Nelly Davis is that next guy. You're rooting for him to get some opportunities, you know, maybe find his way into the G League. If not on a two-way deal, where he'll split playing mostly in the G League and get some opportunities maybe for some team in the NBA as a two-way player. But that's really probably the ceiling for him right now. Doesn't mean long term he can't carve his way into the NBA as a on a 15-man roster at some point in his career. But I do think the fact that he's got positive qualities on both sides of the ball.
Mhm.
At times, he looks like a plus defender. He can be a menace defensively and really good instincts, getting deflections as well. Not the greatest athlete, not a guy with tremendous size, but he might, as he continues to progress, bring some backcourt defensive versatility for somebody. And then he's got a 3-point game that he just needs to continue to try to be consistent at. Um, maybe improve his ball handling. Some of the things he can continue to work on, even though he's not a younger guy. There may be a pathway for him to eventually be help teams in the NBA. But I do think for now it's just get in where you can. And if you get in for some of these summer league games, you got to showcase, man. You got to make the minutes count to improve your chances for more.
Yeah, it's an odd sort of approach, I think, for these summer league guys, where you have to walk a really fine line. And again, John L. being an example of one where you got to walk a really fine line of taking advantage of your opportunities when they come because you know they're going to be finite. You're auditioning for the entire league. You don't know how many minutes you're going to get, but you also can't over push, right? And all of a sudden you're putting on a bad performance from that standpoint as well.
Yeah.
It's an odd sort of balance, but you make a good point about John L defensively. I thought, and you talked about this as well, it's an area where he really became more comfortable throughout the year and it became a strength for him at Arkansas. And the shooting was a little bit odd just from the standpoint that we saw him do it at such a high clip at Florida Atlantic and it never quite hit at
Mm.
Arkansas, but you know that's there regardless. You brought up Stanley Mude and Mason Jones as guys we might see as well, guys who have potentially taken this path. If they get the opportunity in Summer League, what do you expect to see from them?
Well, Mason Jones is a veteran guy. He's going into year 6, and he's been mostly a two-way contract guy. We've seen him in summer league. We've seen sparingly at the end of some games in the regular season in the NBA. But he's a guy they might put out there again. He's been with the Sacramento Kings organization, appeared in a few again NBA games last year. Was the G League Finals MVP. So here's a guy that has been crushing it in the G League. I think he's got the talent to be on a 15-man roster. I think it's other things with Mason.
Mm,
And one of the things about players are when you talk about if you're comparable to there's a ton of guys out there that are just a fringe, just, you know, so close to being good enough to be on a 15-man roster. And sometimes what pushes guys over is just being low maintenance, being a little bit better than other guys at being a true
yeah.
pro. And some of these things where you're viewed as I need this guy on my team because he's great for the locker room, he's low maintenance or no maintenance. And so all of these things matter too. Being a pro, taking the job seriously and to the to a point where maybe others can't sometimes
Mm,
eliminates the need for coaches and staffs and organizations to do any measure of babysitting and some of that stuff. So if you think it's a weird alley I'm going down, it's not just about what you see on the court sometimes and how you produce and what a lot of times it's just what separates all things being equal are just guys you can count on day in and day out to be pros, all the way through and it's you're not dealing with extra stuff. And so this is the job, that this is the assignment for every one of these Friends Pro Hogs, is to be that guy, rise above everybody else on the little things, even off the court. As weird as that sounds, you think it's what they do between the lines. Sometimes it's the other stuff too.
No, it's a good reminder of just how all-encompassing this is because I mean it's an understatement to say that everybody wants to be an NBA basketball player, right? So that there's no shortage of opportunities for shortage of options for all these teams, and it's a good reminder that sometimes as good as you are on the court or whatever it might be, that there's just other aspects that teams are looking for. It is about every single part of you as a basketball player on and off the court that potentially can get you opportunities.
You know what's weird? John Calipari in this recent podcast with Penny Hardaway,
Yeah,
2 Cent, it came on a few days ago. I think the 30th.
yeah.
It came out on the 30th, but I think it was recorded in mid-May when Cal was in Memphis. I was there for that Nike YBL session, so it was about a month and a half later, 6 weeks later when it came out. But one of the things he said is he wants to go 8, 9, maybe 10 deep, and it's important that the 10th man knows he's the 10th man. It's kind
Yeah.
of what we're talking about now. Know your assignment, know who you are, don't get out over your skis, and that makes it easier for the staff to do their job. And so it's stuff like that. It goes at every level, especially up at the pro level. Let's not forget Calipari coached in the NBA, got an NBA team, then New Jersey Nets to the playoffs. Unfortunately, got bounced. Played some good games in there, but it was Michael Jordan and the
Yeah.
Bulls. They're on the second three-peat, so night night. But this is a guy again, Calipari. I listen to what he says. It applies to every level.
Yeah, yeah, and it just is. It's a reminder also that if anybody knows how to get somebody to the NBA level on the court, it's obviously Cal, but there's so much more to it as well. And he talks about that. Talked about that a lot in the podcast as well. That was a fascinating listen. But we got to hit one more break and get a quick message from our sponsors. When we come back, we're going to talk about the FIBA U-19 World Cup. Back and wrapping up shop on the Hog Hoops Report. Kevin McPherson and Jacob Morris with you. Kevin, we've been talking Summer League, we've been talking NBA. Let's talk the FIBA U-19 World Cup. Lots of interesting just storylines there from a recruiting standpoint. Arkansas chief among them in terms of a lot of different targets playing. Chuck Martin in Switzerland for the early games as well. Lots of different guys that are going to make an impact on the NBA level in multiple years, but guys that Arkansas very much has their eye on over the past couple of weeks.
4 players in class of 2026. The number one player overall, these are all 5-star guys. Tyron Stokes,
Mm-hmm.
who's a 6'7" wing, plays in California as high school basketball, originally from Louisville. He's indicated he'd like to visit Arkansas. Jordan Smith Jr., a 6'2" guard out of Virginia, reminds me a lot of Cason Wallace, former Cal player at Kentucky, NBA champion in a major part of
Yeah.
what Oklahoma City did in just his second year. But Jordan Smith Jr. just so similar to him in so many ways, just an elite defender. But the third-ranked player in the class 2026, also taking part. And then you've got Caleb Holt, a top 5 rated
Mm-hmm.
5-star in that class, out of the Atlanta area. Had some really good scoring games in the event. And then Brandon McCoy Jr. out of St. John Bosco in Los Angeles. Probably didn't get to play as much, didn't have as big a role as anybody else on the team, which included those other class of 2026 guys. But 4 class of 2026 players, 3 guards, and then Tyron Stokes. So he's almost positionless. 1, 2, 3, can defend some at the 4. But those are the guys that Arkansas continues to prioritize to some degree, and players that remain on Arkansas's recruiting radar. And I mentioned Stokes has indicated he'd like to visit. Jordan Smith Jr. has said that he does intend to visit
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas sometime after Nike Peach Jam, which is later this month. Multiple international players, one that Arkansas has recruited. This staff has recruited before they even got to Arkansas. Martin was courtside to see him as well. Just happens to be a forward on Germany who lost to Team USA today in the championship game in FIBA. Both teams came in undefeated. Declan DeRue Jr., a 6'8" forward, 230-pound, 7-foot wingspan, and a 38.5 vertical leap. I think he scored double figures every game in this event except for today. I have to look at the final box score to see if he got there. But those are some names to keep an eye on moving forward in recruiting. And Declan DeRue, would be 2025, so Arkansas still has a roster spot just in case they want to go that direction.
It's interesting the way that this roster has come together, where for so long we were talking about the standpoint of, man, are they going to run back only having 8 options or whatever it might be? And now it seems like they have just copious amounts of different guys they could plug in, especially if that potentially comes in. But it'll be interesting to watch over the next year or so, that class of 2026, how it pans out. Who takes visits to Arkansas? The fun part about Cal, as we always talk about, is Arkansas is going to be present and relevant in just about every single one of those recruitments. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. But that's all the time we have on this week's Hog Hoops Report. That is Kevin McPherson. I am Jacob Morris. We'll be back to talk to you next week.